This is The Attraction Factor with Pam Thomas on Empower Radio. 30 minutes to supercharge your life, move past negativity, and reclaim your personal power. Now, here's your host, Pam Thomas on Empower Radio.
Welcome to The Attraction Factor and to our topic today, 10 ways to de-stress. You know, in preparation for today's show, this question popped into my head. And that question was, can we completely eliminate stress from our lives? I really had to sit with this question for quite a while, and I, had to give it some serious thought because thinking, have I ever been completely without stress? After pondering this question for a while and pondering and looking back over the course of my years on this planet, the answer I gave myself was, I think we can create exercises to help reduce the stress because I've done that. And I think we can stop it in the moment because I've done that. And I think we can certainly inventory our worlds to see where there are areas that are more stress prone than others so that we can either remove that stress or stress proof those areas. I've done that. But can we completely eliminate stress? I haven't done that. So my answer is, I don't think we can completely eliminate stress. I think we can reduce it. I think we can avoid it. And I think we can handle it differently. And I think that's the difference. And so today's topic is all about creating those tools to de-stress so that the stress doesn't have as powerful an impact as maybe it has had in the past. But before we start talking about stress, I'd like to share with you the attraction factor tip of the week. And that is, be an airplane. Why would I tell you to be an airplane? Well, there's a quote that I found that I absolutely fell in love with as a quote junkie, obviously. And that quote is from Henry Ford. And he said, when everything seems to be going against you, remember that the airplane takes off against the wind, not with it. Wow, that makes perfect sense. So when the going gets tough, remember, be an airplane and know that you're an incredibly strong person. Setbacks can't and they won't hold you down, not if you don't let them. Always remember that it takes great strength and courage, and it is not, I repeat, it is not a sign of weakness to ask for help when you need to. So be an airplane. Well, with that, let's sink our teeth into today's topic, 10 ways to de-stress. De-stress. When I think of stress, I have to be honest with you, it conjures up images of a furry little beast that runs amok and bounces off the walls, and this furry little beast has gnarly little teeth. And sometimes, depending on my level of stress, it can be small, that little beast, and other times it can seem like a huge, monstrous beast that takes up half the room, and rather than bounce off the walls, it pounds into the walls and slams into the walls and makes quite a mess and lots of noise. Now, no matter how any of us view stress, it does come with consequences. And I'm sure some of you might be familiar with these consequences. It can rob us of our sleep. It can cause our blood pressure to raise, literally, and stay raised. It can make us irritable and cranky. It can steal our focus from us. When we're focused on something else and then all of a sudden we think of something that's really stressful, we are no longer focused on what it was we were focused on before. We're now focusing on the stress. It can cause us to binge eat. I know sometimes when I'm stressed, or at least in the past, I reach for that comfort food. And that comfort food isn't always the best thing for me. And sometimes stress can cause us to not eat at all because we have such a deep pit in our stomach that thinking about having food makes us really nauseous. It can give us worry lines because if you think about it, when we're stressing, we're frowning. It can make us just plain miserable, and it can suck the joy out of our day. So today's the day when we're going to take back our power from the stress monster by looking at some ways to de-stress. I have about 10, and maybe there'll be a few more that'll pop up as we go along. But I'd like to start out with the following, and this was something I read on Facebook. I don't know who the author is. It was shared, it went viral, and it was shared by many, and the author is unknown. But it was really very powerful, and it really hit me. And here's what I read. A psychologist walked around a room while teaching stress management to an audience. As she raised a glass of water, everyone expected that they'd be asked the half-empty or half-full question. Instead, with a smile on her face, she inquired, "How heavy is this glass of water?" Answers called out ranged from 8 ounces to 20 ounces. She replied, "The absolute weight doesn't matter. It depends on how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute, it's not a problem. If I hold it for an hour, I'll have an ache in my arm. If I hold it for a day, my arm will feel numb and paralyzed. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes." And she continued, "The stresses and worries in life are like the glass of water. Think about them for a while and nothing happens. Think about them for a bit longer and they begin to hurt. And if you think about them all day long, you'll feel paralyzed, incapable of doing anything." What I got from this little story is how perception and choice make a huge difference in how we handle stress. You know, as I said to you at the intro of the show, we may never ever totally be able to eradicate stress from our lives, but we can reduce it. We can make the shelf life of it a lot shorter by choice, by perception. So it seems to me that it would be logical that we start with way number 1, and way number 1 would be perception. You know, how we view things makes a huge difference on our feelings, on our thoughts, and particularly our stress levels. You know, it's all too easy to get weighted down by all the tasks and the obligations that we have, and then it becomes difficult to see a way forward, which in turn causes stress. If we have a lot of things on our plate, we may be overwhelmed, and we may not be able to see which one thing should I be focusing on right now, because right now it just looks like a mass of stuff to be dealing with, and so we don't see that way forward. So we can remind ourselves in that moment when we're feeling that overwhelm and feeling that stress, if we can remind ourselves to stop, to take a look at what's in the present moment, what's right in front of us, and make decisions as to what's the next important thing to do, we're then able to reduce the stress. Remember, it's not about throwing yourself into an analysis paralysis situation where you're overthinking things to the point where you're not doing anything, but rather creating clarity around what's happening right now and what needs to be handled first, what needs to be handled second, what needs to be handled third, etc. You know, I've said this before, I'm a huge proponent of not eating an elephant in one bite, but rather breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here when we're talking about changing our perception. What's most important to get done now, then next, and then next, and then next, as opposed to dealing with that entire plate all in one sitting. I mentioned that story brought up 2 things for me, perception and choice. So way number 2 is choice. Believe it or not, we have a choice in how we handle stress. We actually have a choice in everything. But we definitely have a choice in how we handle our stress. We can choose to get tied up in knots, render ourselves extremely powerless, or we can take our power away from the stress. And to do that, I suggest asking ourselves a question. The question could be, what do I choose right now? Just knowing that we have a choice can help take the edge off, and it puts us in a more advantaged place for dealing with it. Instead of being under the stress, we can be on top of the stress, looking down on it, looking at it, and deciding, what can I do now? What do I choose now? We can handle the stress by choice as opposed to it running us or handling us. And if those two ways don't work, then try way number 3. Hug it out. Sometimes just getting a reassuring, warm hug helps to alleviate the stress and the worry. Oh, and that includes giving hugs too. Okay, so hugging makes you feel good, and feeling good produces those good feeling chemicals in the brain, which counteract the negative feelings that stress induces. So get a hug, give a hug. And as a side note, remember, anything that you do that can be positive is going to counteract negative, because the brain can't go both ways. It can't go positive and it can't go negative at the same time. It can only go one way or the other. So if hugging isn't an option, find something else that's more positive, that would be an option, that would create those positive feelings, that would create the good feelings to counteract the negative feelings that stress is creating for you. And here's something that's really easy, and I'm a big proponent of it, and I admit I sometimes forget to do this, although this last week, I was challenged to remember because I had some stressful things going on. And way number 4 is to breathe. When we're stressed, we don't breathe properly. We have a tendency to take really quick, shallow breaths, which does nothing for our stress levels and isn't particularly good for our bodies either. So I want to encourage you, the next time you're feeling stressed, try this breathing technique on for size and see if it doesn't help. I call it the 4-4-4 breathing. And 4-4-4 breathing requires you to take a deep breath in through your nose to a 4 count. So as you're taking a deep breath in, count to 4. Then exhale the breath out of your mouth to a 4 count. So count to 4 as you're exhaling, making sure you're removing all the air from your lungs. And then do it again and do it 4 times. So 4-4-4 breathing. Pay attention. You'll probably notice that as you're breathing, your focus is on your breathing and not on your stress. And you may even notice that your muscles, which were tense because of the stress, have loosened up a bit. Breathing is an amazing tool. It costs us nothing. And I've said it before, it costs us nothing, not in terms of time, energy. It doesn't cost us money. So I encourage you, try breathing. Way number 5. Bliss it out with music. Put on some soothing meditative type music and have a listen. Key into the melody, key into the tone of the music. And while you're doing that, if you're not a visual person, and I am not, pretend that the music is water. Pretend that you're laying on the beach as the music is playing, and the water of the ocean is washing over you. And just like the tide at the beach, as the tide and the water rolls out, pretend that it's taking with it the stress from your body. And sit with that for a few minutes. Even if you just have 5 minutes, use that 5 minutes to engage your mind and to listen to that meditative music. Way number 6, get up and move. Oftentimes when we're in a place of stress, we're usually stuck sitting somewhere, looking at all the things that we're stressed about or thinking about all the things that we're stressed about. And sometimes just getting up and stretching or taking a walk outside or walking to get a drink of water, just getting up and moving, what we're doing is we're not only giving ourselves a break, but we're stepping away for a minute. We're stepping away and catching our breath. And by changing our location, we may even shift our perspective, giving ourselves the opportunity to look at things with a fresh pair of eyes, if you will. So I encourage you, get up and move. If you have a bit longer, exercise. Take a moment to, take about 30 minutes to take a walk. Exercise is a great way. In terms of movement, it's a great way to increase the chemicals in your brain that the good feeling chemicals that also counteract the negative feelings that are going on and the negative chemicals that we might be producing. So whatever you choose to do, whether that's exercising, getting up and stretching, walking, dancing, you can incorporate the music we just talked about. Get up and move. Way number 7, talk it out. I find that when I am in a stressed out place, if I can share it with someone I trust and someone I love, that helps me to release the stress. It also helps me to hear what I'm most stressful about. So I'm creating some clarity around why I'm stressed. And I'm hearing what's going on for me. So I'm untangling that knot, if you will, that I sometimes create when I'm stressed. And what's really great is I get to gain perspective and support from somebody who's not sitting in the stress with me. And because that person's not sitting in the stress with me, they're able to see it from a different perspective. And they're able to help me to untangle it and to see it from a different perspective as well, and to come up with different solutions. So I encourage you, talk it out. If you don't have anybody to talk it out with in the moment, talk it out with yourself. Talk out loud. Or write it down. Write down what you're stressed out about. Get it out of your body. Get it on paper. Because oftentimes when we put it into words rather than holding it in, that in and of itself releases some of the pressure. So get it out. Number 8, make sure to get plenty of water. Water's really important. When we're staying hydrated, that really helps our bodies to function at full capacity. It helps our brains. It helps us to manage stress a lot differently than when we're dehydrated. And that also goes for food. If you can, avoid the junk food. I mentioned early on in the show, one of the consequences is binge eating. And I know for me, when in the past, when I was really stressed, I'd grab for those things that were most convenient and that were comfort food, like the potato chips and dip, or the sandwiches made on white bread, or the leftover pizza. And while pizza's not a bad thing, particularly if you're overeating it, it can be. And so I used to grab for whatever was easiest and whatever I felt was comfortable. And those were the high-carb, starchy foods. And then what happened was, not only was I not eliminating my stress by comfort eating, but I was creating more stress because I knew what I was putting in my body wasn't helping me, wasn't making me feel good. It was actually weighing me down. It was weighing down my thoughts. It was also weighing me down physically because I was putting on weight. So I encourage you, during the times when you're stressed, make sure, again, to get plenty of water and to eat the good foods, the foods that are grown close to the earth, like your veggies, like your fruit. When we can stay hydrated and filled with those wholesome, healthy foods, we give ourselves the energy to deal with the task at hand without feeling run down, which is oftentimes what carbs and sugar do for us. They run us down. And it's very difficult to think. It's very difficult to handle stress when we're feeling run down. Here's another exercise that I'd like to encourage you to try when you're feeling stressed. And this may sound counterintuitive, but tighten up your muscles. Goodness knows when we're stressed out, our muscles are already tight and filled with knots. But with this cool exercise, you're deliberately tightening up each muscle group one at a time. And then you're letting it go one at a time. So, you start with your legs and tighten up your calf muscles. Tighten up both of them if you can. And then release them. And then tighten up your thighs and release them. And do that with your stomach muscles. Do that all the way up to your shoulders and your neck. Tighten, squeeze, and then release. It's interesting what happens to your body when you deliberately tighten your muscles and then deliberately release them. It's almost as if it has a relaxing impact. And here's the other thing it's doing. You're not focusing on stress because you're focusing on your muscle groups. You're focusing on which muscle groups to tighten. So you're shifting your thought process, you're shifting your mindset, you're shifting what you're thinking about. So that exercise serves two purposes. Okay? I also think it's important, too, that when we're in a place of stress, it's important that we start to say no. We have a tendency sometimes to take on more than we can chew for various and assorted reasons. Maybe it's because we're afraid to say no, that we might tick somebody off, or we might hurt their feelings, or we might feel guilty for saying no. And I don't want to go on a little tangent here, but I want to give you a little side note, because stress is often caused by feelings of guilt. And guilt is nothing more than fear. It's basically saying, I'm fearful, or I made a mistake, or I'm fearful that I'm making a mistake. So don't be afraid to say no. Regardless of the reasons of us not wanting to say no, I want you to think about this. When you're under a lot of stress and you're taking on one more task, one more obligation, you're really not doing the other person that you're saying yes to a favor. And you're not doing yourself any favors either by overextending yourself. You're actually doing that person and yourself a big favor by saying no right now. That doesn't mean you're saying no forever. You're just saying no for right now. And you may be able to pick up whatever it is that person's asking you to do at a time when you're not so stressed, so that you're able to complete it in a way that you feel good about and that delivers the best. So say no. And speaking of no, that means drawing some boundaries too, particularly with people in your world that are causing you stress. It's okay to draw boundaries. It's okay to let people know. Boundaries are just a way to let people know how you wish to be treated. So if someone's creating stress with their behavior in regards to you, you're letting them know through your boundaries that you're not going to tolerate that anymore. And really quickly, boundaries can be accomplished in 3 steps. I call them the three C's. Clarity, that means creating clarity around the boundary you're creating, and the consequences if the boundary is overstepped. Communicating, that's the second C. Communicate with the person as to what the boundary is and what the consequence is going to be. And the last C is consistency. When you set a boundary, uphold it each and every time. Because if you're not consistent, then those who you're setting the boundary with, those that are causing the stress in your life, are going to continue to create more stress in your life because they're not going to respect your boundaries, because they're not going to take them seriously. Whatever you choose to do in regards to your stress, whatever tools you come up with to put in your toolbox, remember you do have a choice. And I encourage you and empower you to make those choices and to de-stress as much as possible. As always, if there's some way in which I can support you in dealing with your stress, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Please don't hesitate to send me an email. And you can do that by reaching me at pam@whatswithinyou.com. That's Pam at WHATSWITHINU.com. Or you're welcome to join me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/ all one word, The Attraction Factor. If you have a comment, a question, a concern, if you just need a little extra support, don't hesitate to reach out, to join me on Facebook, to share what your concerns are, and I'll be happy to support you in the best way that I can. As always, it is such a pleasure to be with you each and every week, and I wish you this week a great stress-free week. And I want to express my deepest gratitude to Nate, my producer, for riding alongside of me today and helping me to share the de-stressing tips with you today, as well as Brent Carey, for the founder of Empower Radio, for giving me the opportunity to be on the show each and every week with all of you. Until next week, keep amping up your attraction factor.